Hello, everyone. Today, we are delighted to have the mother of Indian screenwriting, who has scripted such gems as Umrao Jan, Kaneshwar Rama, Bara or Suka, Mandi, amongst many others, and is one of the pillars that made Garm Hava possible. Shama Zaidi, who will be in conversation with filmmaker, curator, and the founder of the country's coolest festival of moving images, Experimenter, Shai Heredia. Thank you so much, Shai and Shama, for doing this for us. Over to you, Shai.
Okay, thank you, Raghu, Lekha, Ravi, and to the BIC for making this happen and for this honor, offering me the honor and privilege to be in conversation with the inimitable Shama Zaidi, who, as we all know, is one of the most uncompromising and inspiring practitioners in Indian cinema. She has contributed her wide repertoire of skills as a writer, set designer, costume designer, producer, and director to many extraordinary films. So thank you, Shama, for being here and for sharing your time with us. I'm excited to be able to chat with you over the next 40 minutes or so about your practice both in film and theater. So let's get right into it. How are you and where are you right now?
Well, I'm in Bombay right now, in Juhu, and it's raining a lot outside.
Okay. So I thought that maybe what we could do is, just start at the very beginning in that sense. And I was actually interested to know a little bit about, where things started for you and your practice as an artist. You were involved with theater from a young age, through your family. Your mother was in theater. So what are some of maybe
Not my father, my mother.
Yeah, your mother, yeah. Well, what are some of your memories of working in theater in your childhood? And I mean, essentially, if you could share a little bit about, the milieu or the mahal that you kind of grew up in.
Well, I was in boarding school, so whatever theater my mother was doing, it started when I was, I think, in about ninth or 10th. I was away in Missouri, but I knew that she was doing, and she used to write for children a lot. And then when I was joined college, she had started this group called Hindustani Theatre. And she was concentrating on adaptations from European and other languages. She even did a Chinese play. And mostly she was keen on Sanskrit drama because she thought people didn't know enough about it.
And were you involved at all with
A little bit. I used to do a few, bit roles and stuff. But then I went off to London to the Slade School of Art, where I did a course in designing. And then I went to various theaters in Germany as an apprentice designer.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. What was the experience like for you as a young independent woman in the early 60s in Berlin and London at the time, working in theater? What was the experience?
I wasn't working in theater. I was a student.
Okay. You apprenticed with the Berliner Ensemble?
A little bit with them, but mostly with the Frankfurter Opera House.
Okay.
Which was quite an experience, because I'd never seen such lavish productions because, opera is the most lavish form of all theater. And they had these very complicated sets and which would revolve and go up and down and had many things I'd never seen in my life. So that was very exciting.
And then when you came back to India, this was what, 1961, 62?
Yeah, 61 I came back. And then I tried to, my mother had passed away in between. Okay. So Sathyu, who was my husband a couple of years later, we tried to revive her theater group, but it didn't really work out, because she had the means and the influence to get a lot of things done, which we didn't have. Yeah.
And then you got involved with IPTA. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's when we came to Bombay. We shifted to Bombay because Sathyu was working with Chetan Anand as his assistant and designer. And in 63, they were working on this film, Hakikat, which was based on the 62 war, which is very timely right now.
Right.
So we came to Bombay. Yeah. Right.
And you got involved in films directly, or was it?
No, I was mostly doing bits and pieces for IPTA.
Right.
I had uh, helping with design and then acting, and I directed a couple of plays also. Yeah.
And so how did like, your involvement with film happen? I mean, I think that
Well, what happened was in '69, that was the Ghalib centenary.
right.
So I had planned that whole program, and my father helped me, and then it became the national program for the Ghalib centenary. And part of that was a documentary on Ghalib, which was based mostly on stills. And there was a commentary which was based on Ghalib's own words, with the Ustad Amir Khan even sang one of the opening ghazals. And because when we used Kafi Saab's voice as Ghalib's voice in that. Yeah, so that's how I got into films. And then we decided to apply to the what was called FFC, which is now NFDC, for a film, which was Garm Hava. But how it started out was that I was doing a play based on Rajinder Singh Bedi's novel called Ek Chadar Maili Si. And I used to sit with him over many weeks working on the adaptation into a play. And while we were doing the adaptation in his office in Tardev, he said, somebody should make a film about the Muslims who didn't go to Pakistan, who chose not to go. So I said, why don't you make it? He said, no, you're going to make it. And you write it and let your husband direct it. So I said, okay. He said, you go and talk to Ismat Chughtai, who is a great friend of my family's, and also I was also very fond of her. So I went, and he said, but don't ask her to write the screenplay because she doesn't know how to write screenplays. That was what he said. So I went to see her, and she wrote the kind of treatment. And then she said, it was a sort of mishmash of her own family's history. Her mother was the one who went and refused to go to Pakistan when her brother went and stayed in a neighbor's house. And her own life and some of her short stories. And she put it together, and then she lost it. She said, my house is being whitewashed and your treatment has got lost. So I'll do another one. So she did another one, which was not exactly like what the first one she had done. Then after a few months, she found the first one. She said, I was cleaning the house, and then I found this. So anyway, it came. So then I worked on it, and I was sitting with her, and we did a treatment. I mean, a full screenplay type of thing. And then I showed it to my father and to Dr. Nurul Hassan. I think he was a minister or he was a professor at Aligarh at that time. He was a great family friend. And they both said, हाँ कहानी तो ठीक है मगर इसकी सियासत ठीक नहीं है. I mean, the story is okay, but the politics is all wrong. So then I didn't know what to do. Then I went and talked to Kafi Saab. Kafi Saab had done the voice, as I had told you earlier, and he was connected with IPTA, and his wife used to act in the IPTA plays and so on. So we were in and out of his house. So I said, you please fix the politics of this script. So he not even fixed the politics, he completely turned it inside out and added all sorts of things, And then he said, we'll change the background. The original background was Lucknow. And he said, the kind of women you are showing, who are very strong women, Lucknow women are not like that. This is more like the West people in Western UP, especially Ismat Chughtai's own family ladies. So we shifted it to Agra, to the shoe. Originally, the father of the house was a railway employee, but we made it into a shoe factory instead, and the rail remained as one of the motifs in the film. So then we applied to the FFC, and they liked it and they gave the money. And we then got all the IPTA actors, including Balraji, to act in it, So that's how it came about.
So when just talking about the strong women characters, I was interested to know how people responded to that when the film came out. actually, and generally how people responded to the film. I know that there were, people were upset with it, and but if you can talk a little bit about what kind of provocations in the film.
Well, what happened was the film was banned,
Hmm.
The censor board said this, we can't allow this film to be made. So what Sathyu did actually, before showing it to the censor board, he went and took and showed it to Indira Gandhi, who happened to be a friend of his, because before she became anything, when she was just a member of the party and she was her father's host, she used to attend one adda every evening where my husband also used to go. So we had met her over 1 or 2 years, almost every day, And there was a lady called Mrs. Gauba in Delhi, and she had this school. And Sathyu and Habib Tanvir were asked by Mrs. Gauba to come to Delhi and teach in her school. So that's how he knew Mrs. Gandhi. So he took her to see the film. Then he told her the censors have banned this film. And you'll be surprised of why, because there are some Muslim members of parliament who were very insulted by the fact that there was one Muslim League member who promptly became a congressman afterwards, you see. And he thought that reflected on him because that's what he had done.
Right.
So the film had been
So it
sort of
upset him.
banned. So ultimately they said, no, you put one song in the beginning saying it happened here, it happened there, yahan bhi hua, wahan bhi hua. So that was the only demand then afterwards the censors made. So then the film was released, then the other side got on into the act. Like the organizer said, this film has been, financed by Pakistan and so on. And so we said, well, we didn't know that the FFC was a Pakistani organization, but anyway. And Mr. What is his name? Chopra, he used to write for, I think, Blitz. He wrote against the film and so on.
Right. So how did the industry respond to the film?
They didn't.
They didn't at all. So it really upset them, or they just, were indifferent to it.
I mean, NFDC films hardly anybody
Right.
saw, and it was only later it sort of got a lot of following and so on. It was very difficult to release the film. I think it was released for 2-3 weeks. Yeah.
And was there a press response? Was there any kind of critical response at the time?
Press response was very good. We had
Right.
very good reviews of it. Hindi, Urdu, English press, they all responded very sympathetically to the film. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you also about, you did also write other scripts, right, before this?
No, I haven't written any other scripts before this.
Because I read somewhere that you wrote a story about a Naxalite.
Yeah, that was later made by, those two scripts were at the same time. That Sathyu made is Kahan Kahan Se Guzar Gaya.
Okay.
Another film of his, which we shot many years later in Calcutta.
Right. Okay. And then you went on to write and work with costume design and production design and set design. And in another interview that I read, you interestingly said, even with like Garm Hava, you said, considering the fact that you did so much, in some sense, you could have directed it as well. And what was, and what was the role of, what was the opportunities for women in terms of directing? Have they changed? Was it similar in those days to then?
Well, yeah, I think there are many more women directors now, but that's true all over the world. It's not just India. But surprisingly, the television was more women oriented, and it was quite easy, much easier for women to become directors on the television medium, right from the beginning. In fact, Sathyu and I, we trained for television, and we joined Doordarshan for about 3 or 4 months in the beginning. Yeah. When it only has a black and white, and it was restricted to Delhi.
Okay. But working in the industry for women, what was it like for being on a set? Were there a lot of women on set, or was it I mean, clearly, I don't think that was. I mean, that's definitely
No,
changed now. Yeah.
there are many more women now. So.
And yeah, so if you could talk a little bit about the opportunities that there were, and how you managed to kind of
Well,
carve out this space for
when
yourself.
we had worked on the film on Gandhi in South Africa, we discovered there were a whole lot of mostly white women, some Indians,
Right.
hardly any blacks, and we discovered that the complete makeup department was women, and the art department was largely women. Editing department was all women. So even in Hollywood, editing and makeup have been women's fields. So here, editing, a lot of people have gone in for editing, women. But you'd be surprised that they were not allowed to do makeup until about a couple of years ago because the organization of the union, they didn't want any.
Right. And what about for you as an art director? I mean, you did have some run-ins with the Art Director
Yeah,
Association
because
as
they
well.
said, oh, you're becoming a member because uh, of your husband, because he was also an art director, basically. So I said, look, I have studied in Germany and England as an art director, and my husband is not even trained. So what are you saying? Ultimately, I became the secretary of the Art Directors Association.
Of course. Um, So, I mean, I wanted to also, since you have collaborated a lot, with Sathyu, of course, with other directors, Sham Satyajit Ray, with all your writing work. I was interested to know what your thoughts are on collaboration. I mean, I also, I work on films with a friend of mine, Shimona Goel, and I think that, I mean, I don't know whether it's about, for me, I think about it as friendship and trust. What are your thoughts around this, or is it, or that does the role have to be clearly defined? What kind of power dynamics make a collaboration work?
Well, I've done a lot of especially for writing collaboration. I mean, I didn't do, and I have worked with the Bansi Chandra Gop, you know, uh, he was an art director. I used to do the costumes and the set decoration and so on. So, yeah, but you have to have a very good relationship with the other person, otherwise, not possible.
But like if you could talk a little bit about, let's say, your collaboration with Kaifi Azmi, or
Well,
because I
I
think
only
you.
collaborated with him on one film, and he really didn't write many films after that. He wrote, I think, Hiranja,
Right.
and he was mostly involved in writing songs for films.
Okay.
And he was basically also a party worker, full-time party worker. So he did a lot of activity, and he was running IPTA for quite many years.
Right. And so would you say that, I mean, so working collaboration, like you said, you have to have, I mean, I think some kind of also trust in with the aesthetics that the other person is bringing to the relationship, right?
Yeah, well, the person I worked with most was Javed Siddiqui, who we started with the Satyajit Ray's film. And that was very interesting because I was doing the costumes, and ultimately Satyajit Ray had asked me to do some background research for him, which I did. And then he said, why don't you do the dialogues? You translate the dialogues for me. And Kefi Saab was very keen, but Satyajit Ray said, Kefi doesn't speak English at all, so I won't be able to communicate with him. So you do it. So I said, well, there's this journalist friend of mine, Javed. I'll meet him at Kefi's house. I'll ask him because his Urdu is much better than mine, and we will do it together. So then they had a test for Javed, and he said, now he's fine. Then when we finished doing the whole thing together, then they called some Urdu knowing people to find out whether we had done a good job or not. And they said, yeah, ye sab theek hai. So then that's how it worked with Ray. Quite an experience working with him, because he is so thorough. I've never had such an eye for detail.
What was the test?
The test was that these people came
Uh-huh.
and well, the test for Javed was that he was just interviewed. But the
Right.
test of the dialogues was that 3 or 4 people who listened to the whole thing and they said, "Nahi, abhi theek hai."
So once he had their approval, then he went
Yeah,
on
then
to
we went
the.
away. And then Javed worked on the sets also as an assistant. So and he's written about it. Very nice piece he's written.
So, I mean, you know, I actually saw the film. I'd seen it many years ago, and then I saw Garm Hava now in January, like right at the peak of the CAA protests, and of course, it resonated in this kind of deep and almost tragic sort of way. I feel like, you know, partition is a subject that we haven't really talked about or discussed in film very much. And I think it's much more in literature, and I wonder about, you know, why that has happened. Like, why is it that this particular memory is not, you know, people kind
Okay,
of seem
okay.
to stay away
Name
from?
me one film about the freedom movement.
I mean, I suppose the first one that everyone talks about would be Gandhi.
But that's not the freedom movement. That's a
That's
biography.
true. That's true. So, but that's my point, which is that it's only biographical films, you know.
Well,
Um,
my take. I'm sorry,
hmm,
I'm being rude, but
uh-huh,
most of our historical films
right.
are the same formula of Londa Londi,
Hmm,
disguised as a historical film. You know, like Jodha Akbar,
right.
Anarkali, Mughal-e-Azam, Ashok. Everything has to have a man-woman relationship, and then it becomes
Right.
historical. You know, so we really have not had any serious. Maybe in some regional languages, yes, but not in Hindi.
No, so I mean, for me, I think that so if one were to, I mean, you know, people talk about this genre, which I think is a really problematic thing, you know, the partition film or the social history film, you know, and I think that that kind of is what lends itself to just these kind of formulaic structure. So it'll be the girl boy story, then it'll be like the biographical story. And I think that's and then people begin to just cater to that kind of way of making a film versus actually looking at more kind of historical narratives, which I think Garm Hava is in that sense, you know. Um, yeah, so I mean, so you know, like I was saying earlier about when we saw the film, I was thinking about what a film like this would be in the present day. You know, whether we would, I mean, how does because I mean, Garm Hava is essentially a reflection of society, of a society at a particular time and conflict, and how you know a family negotiates this. So how do you think? I mean, do you think it would be much more different in terms of dealing with you know these ideas around belonging and home? Um, you know, um, especially in terms of reflecting Muslim identity today and a certain kind of Muslim consciousness today. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a question of Hindu identity, you see, and we're getting the,
Bull by the horn.
the yeah, being made the victims, but it's a question of what is the Hindu identity. They haven't decided that yet.
I mean, you have talked about a certain kind of like Amar Chitra Katha sort of Hinduism. Is what you've mentioned before
Well,
that.
I mean, the present looking at history is such a simplistic point of view. It is, I think, even more simple-minded than Amar Chitrakatha at the moment, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
you get one general to talk about the Indus Valley civilization. I mean, I think, you know,
Yeah. So I mean, so in terms of what you feel is currently, you know, happening in the country, like what are your views on, you know, how things can potentially change in terms of how, at least in terms of how those of us in the arts can respond, you know, to the current situation, the current kind of political situation that I think is, you know, divisive politics and that we're all trying to deal with in the everyday.
Well, I'm sure filmmakers are attempting to reflect what's going on, but there's such an atmosphere of fear, but I don't think anybody is really, it's easier in writing than in cinema to do something like that.
Have you seen work recently that you think, both with writing, theater, cinema, that you feel, in some sense offers a certain kind of resistance?
Not really, no. I feel that, as I said, this whole atmosphere of self-censorship, you know, is so strong. I don't think anybody would be able to do that much.
I mean, I think that's true, but I feel like a lot of us feel quite, um, you know, frustrated, of course, with the situation. But I think that efforts, people are trying to make
Yeah, I'm
efforts
sure.
with like
I'm sure.
making
Yeah.
things. And I'm wondering whether there are any examples that you can offer from your experience of how you have resisted or performed in some kind of acts of resistance through, let's say, theater, or of course, film and things like that.
Right now, I can't really think of anything because I think there are other aspects of our lives, our society, like you said, the woman problem, the relationship between men and women, which I think these are themes which are being dealt with in a newer way. It was not possible earlier. So I think the political films will come, but the whole breakup of the joint family system and the fact that we still 90% of people have arranged marriages, and yet we have the more love stories in our cinema than anybody else, so
Right.
so I mean, I think the current cinema is not about, not even the mainstream films are not so simple minded, in fact, if you see films of the 50s and 60s, you really cringe. They're so horrible. The only decent thing were the songs. So you can, but if you see the picturization of those songs, it's quite awful. But the songs themselves, I mean, the 50s, 60s, 70s songs were art forms in their own,
Right.
which were superior to the function they were made to carry out.
And the stories, would you say like the stories have changed significantly in
Yeah,
terms of?
I find that there's more depth to the characters, and everybody is not heroic if he's a hero. There are shades, to the characters. I think that is was there in the theater and literature, but in cinema, it was considered the Indian public are all idiots, so we must lay down to their.
And I think more recently there's been, a lot of this independent cinema, which I think is telling other stories, which I think is a little more quite refreshing. And also, this star system isn't so oppressive
Oh,
anymore. Well,
yeah,
more recently.
yeah, because of the multiplex. I mean, they need 7, 8 films at one time. Earlier they were showing only one, so they can, and then the city audience and the rural audience are different, and anyway they're more into watching television, I feel.
Right.
All the cinemas in small towns are closing down.
Yeah, I mean, and now I think with the internet, everyone's watching everything on. I mean,
Yeah,
so
and then the new format, is watching a film is like reading a story. I mean, you can stop when you like, you can switch off if you don't want to read the rest, you can go back and run nice scenes you like again and again. So it's like, like whenever I go to a bookshop, I see the opening of the book, and then I see the end of the book, and then I see the middle of the book. And if that's okay, then I buy the book. So,
right,
right.
right. Yeah, it's very fleeting, I mean, I think that there was this filmmaker, Michael Snow, who talked about a social contract that you make with people when you're sitting in the cinema, that you're going to collectively watch a film together. And it's that experience versus what he was talking about was like the ambulatory experience of being in a gallery where you're looking at art, where you just engage with the work very briefly and then move on. So, and I thought that was quite interesting in terms of making that separation around how you watch cinema in the theater space versus watching a moving image in the gallery space, for example. And I feel like now with the internet, like you're saying, there's this, you can pause and you can walk away and come back and watch it again. And it's just your own individual, singular experience versus this kind of collective experience. And I wonder what's going to happen to that collective experience now, for someone like me who runs a festival, now with this whole pandemic, it's a huge question mark, when and how. And I think that's because, I fully believe in this collective experience of watching film, and yeah, it's sad actually, the way it's kind of now this fragmented sort of experience, really. So, are there any films that you've seen recently that you feel like is something that, was quite inspiring for you, or that you liked, or that you would recommend someone sees?
Actually, to tell the truth, I don't like watching films anymore. I prefer to read books. Because by the time you're halfway through the film, you know what the rest is going to be,
That's true.
And part of being a script writer. So.
Right. That's true. That's a burden you carry about and also the banalness of what is being made outside for the most part. But so books, can you recommend some books that people should be reading? And everyone's kind of cooped up at home. So, I think people would appreciate getting some recommendations from you. So tell us one book that we could look at that we should definitely read.
Well, I read a book called The Persian at Age.
Okay.
Which I thought was an interesting surmise of his. He said that what is called the Muslim period is actually the Persian period of Indian culture, because it's not as if we absorb the whole of, and a lot of it was unreligious, the food, the architecture. Right now we're going through the European age, although we're no more a colony, but you and I are talking to each other in English, whereas about 100 years ago we might have been talking in Farsi.
Right.
And this reminds me that my friend Bansi Chandragupta, who was a art director, and so he was asked to be the art director of the Gandhi film, and he said, "You and I will both there." Then he came and he said, "Nahi, mujhe nahi karna hai. I'm sorry, I can't tell you in English. It doesn't sound so good." He said, "अंग्रेजी बोलते बोलते मेरी जबान लुढ़क जाएगी, पलट जाएगी, तो मैं इसलिए मैंने वो काम नहीं किया."
Right.
Because he was a regular worker in the Bombay or the Calcutta film industry, so he was not used to talking in English.
Right. Actually, when I spoke to you earlier, you did mention that even in Pakistan, people were upset with the film. How did it get there? How did people see it and things? Just through networks.
Yeah, networking and so on. And in those days, people used to come to Amritsar just to watch films,
Okay.
But they said, no, the end you shouldn't have, kept the person not going to Pakistan.
Right.
So actually, what I find very intriguing right now is this whole TikTok thing,
Right.
All these people in the villages carrying out their fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way is very charming. And in another way, I found something, it was sad, but did you notice that people who were walking back to their villages from towns put on their best clothes to walk, and they were also smartly turned out.
I know. Yeah.
I found that.
Yeah. No, that was, those images were extremely,
so maybe
revealing.
If you maybe could do a film combining the attitude towards TikTok of this, they're the same people who dance in front of the cameras and do TikTok, and they're the same people who had to walk back to their villages, Maybe you could work on something on that.
That's a great idea.
Totally
that's a great idea. And also people are now really upset. Obviously everyone's really upset with the TikTok ban.
Yeah.
Because it's, it was such a kind of important, self-representation and telling your story tool.
Without we bypassed the written word and gone straight into the image, and it's part of our oral tradition. From the oral tradition, you've gone straight on to the digital media tradition, which I found totally fascinating.
Yeah, no, that is really fascinating. And I think it's also, it's definitely like the kind of the new century. It's the new device, the new kind of medium in some sense, the TikTok social media tool. Okay, so thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I am looking forward to watching the film again. I think they've subtitled it, so that's going to be exciting to see. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Raghu.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Shai, and thank you, Shama.
Okay.
Thank you so much for doing this for us.